Hi guys, another election update. In this game I'm going to be talking about how the markets are responding and how business is already responding in the north of the country to a anticipated Boris win. Thank you for the wonderful comments I had on my last few videos. Thank you for all the support and all the positivity. Thanks guys. Getting really exciting now. I'm sensing there are a lot of people in Labour who are still quite optimistic, even though the Salvation poll, which was hotly anticipated by Labour, because last election at this time, it brought the lead down to a gap of only 1%, indicating a hung parliament. But this time it put the Tories on 45% and Labour on 31%, which was a real boost. And as a result of that, the pound strengthened against the euro. It then lost a little bit of momentum against the euro today. And the forex markets calmed down a little bit because another poll came out which indicated that the gap had narrowed. However, it's the Salvation and the YouGov polls who've shown consistency in predicting election results, so those are the most accurate. They're talking now about the exit poll. I've always found the exit polls to be very good. They're kind of talking about whether will the exit poll be right or not. Well, I anticipate it will be, but maybe they're trying to drop a few hints that the exit poll is not going to be that accurate. I still think the polls not the polls that have come out showing the gap narrowing are the incorrect ones, but the big question is going to be how much vote rigging kind of election fraud goes on the day, and how many of the young people of those 2 million that have apparently signed on to vote really come out to vote, how enthusiastic they really are, and whether they're all going to vote for Labour. Obviously they won't all vote Labour, but I think Labour, anticipating a very high proportion, will. So the forex market seem to be anticipating a Boris win. I think the stock market movement seem to be anticipating a Boris win. And as I said, the bookies are definitely anticipating, very much in line with the YouGov poll of 100,000 people, a strong victory for the Conservatives. I did notice with the bookies, although more money has been staked on the Tories by far, when you just boil it down to individual bets and you take the amount of the bet out the picture, there about an even number of bets have gone on Labour and Tory, which is quite interesting because that was what was going on in the US election. All the small bets were on Trump and all the big money was on Hillary, which meant that Hillary was of course a huge favourite, but Donald Trump ended up winning. So there are a lot of Labour people out there not staking much money but fairly confident in a Labour result. So I just thought I'd mention that. Obviously that's not my prediction. So a very interesting guy called Neil Sinclair was on the business report with Sky, and he was saying that although GDP was almost stagnant in the last 3 months, he said that there's total divergence between what's going on in the north of the country and what's going on in the south. He said the north is more buoyant, more confident. He's seeing strong sales of property. The property market is much more buoyant in the north. The housing market, as I say, is positive. Industrial lettings are up. Office lettings are up. He says that the south is remaining negative and stagnant, and most of the GDP growth is being driven by the north at the moment, but being dragged down by the south. And he says what he is seeing is that the northern markets are upbeat about a Boris. They're already factoring in a Boris win, and they're anticipating a huge wall of cash and investment inflow, particularly into the north. I just think maybe people in the south have become far too dependent on the EU, and people in the north are actually awake and alive to the possibilities outside the EU, and businesses up there are getting excited about it, gearing up for it, and this is driving growth in the north. So I think that's something I definitely haven't heard before. It's a very big, if it's true, and this guy seemed pretty certain about it because he was in property and investment, and he said he could sense this positivity and upswing in the northern market. So it's certainly something interesting which hasn't been widely reported as far as I know. Just back to this election, SNP set to do really well in Scotland. This is making it going to be, well, the rise of the SNP is what's going to make it really hard for Labour to win elections, because they used to rely so heavily on getting a nice wad of seats out of Scotland, which they don't get. And it's going to be interesting to see after this election if the Tories do break the red wall up in the northeast, Manchester and the Midlands. Are those working class voters now going to stay Tory, and are Labour going to continue courting the champagne socialists the kind of university educated, and the youth, will that, and of course the identity politics sector, will they keep plugging on with that, or will we see these voters staying with the Tories in the future? It's going to be interesting to see whether we've permanently shaken up the system, and whether those traditional Labour voters who voted Labour for years and decades in their family are now going to move away to something else. People were asking at Nigel's party, I really don't like the name, the Reform Party. No party with that name's going anywhere. It reminds me of when they used to say Reform School, which was where the delinquents were sent. It's just got a kind of very communist authoritarian sound to it, and it makes it sound like all it's about is the reform of the House of Lords. I don't think that's going to grab people. I just wanted to talk about Boris saying that he might think, it seemed rather an off-the-cuff statement, possibly something driven by Dominic Cummings, that he might axe the BBC licence fee. Well, I was hearing Mike Graham talk about the eye-watering sums of money that people like Stephen Fry, Gary Lineker, David Attenborough get paid, and I do feel that these don't reflect their market value. These people are basically boring. And David Attenborough, fair enough, I won't diss him, but when it comes to Gary Lineker, I mean, the guy's not a thunderclap of fun. He's pretty dour. I believe Adrian Childs, I thought Adrian Childs had finished his career, but he's still being paid in the millions. My gosh, what is that guy? He's like a substitute from Valium, a substitute for Valium. I mean, I don't know. I really don't feel these people are worth the eye-watering amounts they're getting paid. Plus, you'll get the people on Strictly Come Dancing like Claudia being paid to do that, and then Claudia's being paid to do a radio show. I mean, she's one of the better ones, but I think for a public service broadcaster, a lot of the values of money that these people are getting paid, I feel, just doesn't, for me, it doesn't represent value. Also, 40 local radio stations for the BBC. How many listeners do these individually have? And like I've noticed, I used to go on not hospital radio, on BBC local radio. I wasn't paid, and I had to deliver content with astrology. Had to go in ridiculous times, like midnight on New Year's Day, to deliver the predictions, and I did various shows for them. As I say, I wasn't paid, but they have so many people there. They'll have the presenter, the producers, they've got the state-of-the-art equipment, whereas people on commercial radios, from LBC to TalkSport, Talk Radio, you've literally got one person doing the show, one person answering the phone. You don't have a whole team of 6 people writing the show, driving the show, producing the show, answering the phone, delivering the tea. So many people are employed, which brings me to their output of television programs. I mean, I quite like some of their crime drama. I mean, Silent Witness is really good. But have you guys ever looked at the credits after one of these programs? I particularly noticed it on Killing Eve. The credits are unbelievable. You tend to look at the actors, you think of the cameramen, you might think of the makeup artists. There are accountants. There are literally 5 hairdressers. There are set designers like it's going out of fashion. Location scouts. I feel that it's profligate in terms of the amount of people employed to create a program, and I feel that Killing Eve, it was a good program. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it, but it was excessive. The locations and the money that was put into that show, the script and the content wasn't enormously wonderful. It really did stretch the imagination. You really had to suspend your disbelief, and the second series really lacked any form of literary substance. But I just feel that some programs like that, wads of cash must be thrown in it. And I feel what the BBC are doing, similar to what I said about the NHS, it's not just about providing entertainment. It's about providing employment, and it's also about training people. They are absolutely a massive university for the media. I think that's what all these local radio stations are in part for, to train people to use the equipment, to drive the show, to produce the show. And they also use these programs like Killing Eve and many others that they produce to train costume designers, to train hairdressers, to train makeup artists, because you've got simply so many of them employed making these programs. So we're looking at the BBC as a content producer, but also an employer and a university of media. So I'm not quite sure if this is all value for taxpayer money, and especially as we are forced to pay with menaces. I mean, even if you don't have a television, you cannot stop those rude letters coming. You can ring, they stop sending you them for 3 months, and then they start again. So, you end up just, you pay the license even if you never watch their content, just to avoid the harassment. So I do think it's time for a review of the BBC, of the value of money it offers, of the ridiculous salaries that are being paid to people who in many cases, excuse me, but are boring, and who use their position to spout propaganda. Gary Lineker, he's paid as a football pundit, but what do we get from him? He's on Twitter promoting a Remain agenda. I don't think that's his place. I definitely think those people are being paid way in excess of what they would be paid if they genuinely had to compete. And you seem to get a secure job. Once you're in there, you're in for good, and you seem to be moonlighting on many other programs. So anyway, that was just a little bit of a rant of mine on the BBC. To end up, I just wanted to say with the NHS, they will tell you that the NHS is under pressure because of an aging population. But if you look back to the 70s, there were 5% geriatric population, so that's sort of over 60s. Now, there was been a 5% increase in the geriatric population since 1970. And yet in the 70s, the budget for the NHS was 25 million. Now it's 135 billion. 25 billion to 125 billion. Even if you account for inflation, the amount spent on the NHS has grown far, far, far faster than the geriatric population. And bearing in mind, over 60 now is not over 60 what it was in the 70s, because people tend to be a lot more healthy into their 60s and 70s. So I think it's definitely all the extra money going to the NHS. It's not about the elderly, and they shouldn't use that as an excuse, because the increase far outweighs the 5% increase since the 70s in the geriatric population. So guys, getting exciting. I probably will find something else to say between now and the election. Thank you for all your great feedback. I've got some other vlogs prepared. Definitely want to look at the chart of Ghislaine Maxwell, because I believe that she's going to come out and do an interview probably in the US. I'm going to look at her chart, Andrew's chart, because it's looking quite interesting at the moment, and I have some feedback on that. And I'll be throwing in some things about Epstein. And I do want to say a big thank you to the subscriber who alerted me to the excellent work Amazing Polly was doing on Jeffrey Epstein. And I strongly urge people who are incredibly interested in Epstein to look at Amazing Polly's work. Although when I do my charts, I will kind of throw in and summarize some of the things she's saying, because she goes into an awful lot of detail, and I understand it's you need the time to be able to listen to it. I think I might kind of summarize it down and acknowledge her as my source and do a little spiel on that in the near future. Thanks guys, and good luck for Thursday.